So, when I was being the wingnut,
Right.
and you were being the Geronimo guy,
Roger that.
we served during a time of peace, as far as there wasn't any combat. But a lot of the guys I served with, good old George Air Force Base over there in Victorville, were returning Vietnam vets
Yes.
that had been over there through
Right.
the brutal aspect of the war.
Yes.
Realizing I was in the Air Force, but there were guys that I served with that you could tell there
Sure.
was a mental issue.
I had friends. We were in a free fall parachute team, so we had a sprinkling of special forces guys, and they all rode rocket motorcycles. You know what they call the crotch rockets.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And
Living on the
they
edge.
were having their difficulties with adjustment to a non-conflict situation. There also was a lot of drugs in Army Europe. It was terrible, and we almost lost a different kind of war there. There was all kinds of variety of Vietnam veterans. There were the people who you would call the quiet professionals, and there were also people who had done a front load of drugs, and there were people who were messed up, and there were people who were the very best kind of soldiering soldiers. But Vietnam certainly imposed a toll on the more than two-thirds of the draft force, who were a couple of million guys who played by the rules, did what they were told, answered the call. The group point man of the Antelope Valley and the Antelope Valley Wall Committee really is one of the noble-hearted community initiatives. But our friend Trooper Mike Bertell with the 101st Airborne, you know, he was typical of a guy who got the trifecta.
Yeah.
He had a life of his own. He had a business in the San Fernando Valley, and a girl, and a '56 Chevy, that American Idol. And he was drafted. That was one hit. Drafted into infantry. That was the second hit. The third, he was sent to the Cambodian incursion with the 25th Infantry Tropic Lightning. And when they finished where they weren't actually there with that end of the war, they went to the 101st Airborne, and his unit got mauled.
Yeah.
Mauled. So having said that, he's a very open-hearted, humble, noble-hearted apostle of the Point Man, Antelope Valley, which it has a faith orientation, but they don't wear it on their sleeve.
Right.
They work as a talking amongst themselves, talking therapy circle, and some of them overlap into groups like Vets or Veterans, or go to the VA Vet Center, or go to the Coffee for Veterans. But the Vietnam soldier really was the reluctant warrior who had to do his or her duty,
Right.
and they came back with a front load of toll on it.
Yeah, I always find it the carry on to our current generation of returning war veterans that, you know, the Vietnam vet is sending a message today, because for me the struggle is when we go out and we go to these homeless encampments to where, you know, there's veterans living out
Yes.
in the boons out
Yep.
there, and they are very bitter. A lot of them want to be there.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't want the help. But the mindset comes to an individual that I ran into with a group of other people that we were down in the Santa Clarita Newhall area, and we came up on this encampment, and we were talking, and one of the gentlemen was a Vietnam veteran, and he spoke of, he goes, "Where were you 40 years ago when I had a life to live? You're coming to me now that I'm
Sure.
in my 80s,
Right.
and I go, and now you want to give me help." I go, "But my life's almost to an end now." And
Yes.
I go, when I came back from Vietnam, when I needed the help, you were nowhere to be found. So I carry that on, and that's made a very heavy impact in my life, because now when I look at our returning veterans from war now, let's make sure that 40, 50 years from now, they're not sitting in an encampment somewhere, and they say, "Where were you when I came back from the war zone?"
Honestly, I think that is a lot of the work right now. And post 9/11 vets, you know, it's very interesting. Some of their stewards and their caregivers and their custodians are those same Vietnam veterans who did feel bypassed.
Yes.
And they want to have an investment in the 9/11 generation, helping to ensure that they do have less of an impact. Sometimes there's also a ripple of, I would say not resentment, but, you know, a real regret, because they do experience what you're discussing there. You know, the thing that happened with a lot of the Vietnam veterans was there was a lot of bad paper. There were people who got other than honorable discharges for minor infractions. And the difficulties with that is it's hard to get a job afterwards. Then alcohol or drugs become a matter to buffer. Then mental illness intervenes or crosses over. It's what's called dual diagnosis. And that's how you get people camping out in the desert. Even such people can be helped.
Yes.
And it's a regime of getting to a mutual contract of beginning with the beginnings of trust. There are therapies that work. There's a bunch of names for them. There's a half a dozen reputable.
Right.
There's also some con men out there,
Lots
charlatans.
Yes.
There are phony veteran charities. There are schools that are preying on veterans. So one of the things that, whether it's a guy camping out in the desert or whether it's somebody who's trying to make their way back into the job market through a community college course, to get with reputable and accountable veteran service officers. They work at VFW, they work at American Legion, they work at the VA vet centers. Some are volunteers, some are staff, and also your congressional staff. You know, and I know that Steve Knight's staff, and Steve Knight is a Cold War Army veteran, that his staff, Chris Ward and Lisa Moulton, do first-class work on veteran casework.
Correct.
So we can help each other. We don't have to let people go down.
Yeah.